Good morning and welcome to Monday Mornings with Margie. I'm psyched to have our guest today, Dr. Raul Sanchez, who has decided to join us. I'm out in my backyard today for this recording, and you may see my Boston Terrier Gronk, who sometimes joins us in the background, so you'll have some extra entertainment. But I'm going to let Dr. Sanchez introduce himself. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself professionally, personally, whatever you want to share.
All right. Thank you. So happy to be on Mornings with Margie here. This is amazing. And I like the name Grunk. That's amazing too.
It is.
Like,
And
if he
he's
gets
too
wild, just throw him a football. He'll be good. You know? So I have a PhD in psychology. I've been working in clinical psych since 1999 here in a town called Sioux City, Iowa. So my story is pretty unique. So my birth dad took his own life when I was a young child, a toddler. And we moved from Texas up to Sioux City, Iowa, where I'm at, and is mostly raised by my mom and my grandmother. And so had a life of a lot of trauma. So unfortunately, because of those events, my mom dated and, had some paramours who were alcoholics, trauma strugglers. And so their parenting style was like my way, the highway. And so I went through a lot of physical abuse, a lot of emotional trauma, was witness to some sexual trauma in front of me. And so I just grew up trying to avoid life. So as a young boy, I found baseball and I was really good at it. And having a single parent mom and stepdad / father figures who were in and out of treatments and in and out of, jail, honestly. And with restraining orders, they just struggled to parent because they were dealing with so much of their stuff. So their parenting was completely hot and cold. Like it was a day like a birthday party or, where I was getting hit. And so what I did is found my bicycle and I rode my bike everywhere around town and I went to baseball practices and there was no computer or cell phone or no way to gauge how far I rode, but I rode multiple miles a day. And the interesting thing is I built this tolerance to be able to ride a bike across town. So it was like 6 miles one way, and I'd ride over there to practice and ride back. And then sometimes I had to go the other way across town. That was like 9 miles on a bike, and just being a little kid, like playing Little League. My sister and her best friend used to make fun of me because there was this hill that I had to try to beat. And I finally beat it and the hill became easy. So I stuck a bunch of weights in a backpack to make it difficult. And the only reason people sometimes ask me this, they're like, dude, you just pushed yourself. I was like, no. Like, I think I got lucky. I was blessed, but I thought I was trying to steal bases and I knew biking made me faster. So I just kept stacking weight and going. So that birthed this thing in me where I just pushed myself. And so I became a really good football player. And I met a girl who was a nice girl. Like she was just different. One of those kind of like girls that nobody, could date her. Like she's undateable kind of a thing. So I finally got to date her and she became pregnant at 16. I was 17. We have a child and my whole world shatters. And I don't know if I'm going to go to college to play football. That was my dream. And so we basically sat around the table with her parents and they basically said, we'll help you have the baby and you guys can stay in school. We'll figure out your relationship later, kind of a thing. So it's kind of a crazy story. So I was an all-state running back here in Iowa. And in my bedroom, besides all the heroes I had from Sports Illustrated covers, like taped all over my wall, I had a baby crib in my room.
Wow.
So my buddies would come over and they'd like, dude, this was real life. Like you have a crib. I'm like, what? You knew this? And they're like, yeah. And it's so real when you see it. Yeah. And they would like touch the crib and touch a diaper and be like, what? This is so crazy. So during the week, my girlfriend, Stacy, and her mom, Fran, took care of Tyler, our son. And the crazy thing is she's a clinical nurse, by the way, worked in a hospital in psych unit and mostly behavioral adolescents. And so that's what she did. And so she retired to help with our son. And then Stacy and I both, she was like a cheerleader. I was a, all-state football player and four-star for sport athlete.
Mhm.
Or sport athlete. I don't know. I got tongue twisted. And then I also worked, my grandma had a restaurant. And so I put in, 30 hours a week working to, buy formula and diapers and whatever we could afford. And the craziest thing is we just kept thriving. It just, nothing really slowed us down. It's crazy what you can shave off, trim the fat, so to speak, off your life of things that are in the way. And I actually doubled down on my goals and ended up getting a college scholarship. And I went and played football at North Dakota State. And so Stacy and I, in our relationship, we just became closer, and I asked her to marry me, and she came with me and Tyler. I actually joined them more specifically. And we went to North Dakota State, and I played football, and we raised a son. We both graduated with bachelor's degrees. And then from there, we went on to we went on to the University of Iowa, where I got my PhD in psychology.
Wow.
Yeah. And then 10 years later, we moved back home, which is Sioux City, Iowa. This is where we graduated from. This is where it started. So I kind of went a roundabout way at becoming a clinical psychologist. But as a dad at North Dakota State, the craziest thing happened. I came home one day, and my 2-year-old hid from me because he was afraid of me, because I parented with this default mode dad thing, which is, if you do something wrong, you're going to get spanked in the butt. Like, that's just how it is. And so I came home one day and he hid from me. And I was never so broken in my life. Like, I'm not kidding. I really sat down and my whole world crashed, because the whole reason I fought to keep Tyler and fought to be in Tyler's life is I was like, I'm not going to infect my son with this disease of fatherlessness. And so then when he hides under the table from me, I talked to Stacy. I'm like, does he say he doesn't like dad? Does he say he's afraid? And she's like, I don't know. He just hid. Well, I figured out that I was the one who disciplined. And so every time he associated me with spanking. So I literally signed up and I took a behavioral modification class to try and figure out how to fix this. And it started working. And so I kept taking more classes. So I went about face from athletic training and switched to psych. And here we are. So it's an amazing journey.
That's amazing. And wow. How, like, what do you think the difference was? I want to get into talking about resilience and so forth, but and I guess this is all tied into it, but you were still fairly young. Like, you were still a younger adult,
Yes.
Guy. And what do you think hit you in that moment? Because for some people that wouldn't shift anything necessarily. But for you, you actually went out and took a course and kept taking courses so that you could parent effectively without having to use, physical abuse or physical, discipline. What do you think was like that spark in you from that situation?
So since I found out Stacy was pregnant, I literally just started reading the Bible. I didn't have a dad, didn't have anyone to look toward. Stacy was a Christian. We were raised Catholic, but we had to go to church twice a year, like Christmas Eve and Easter Eve, Easter. And so those are it. And so I had a Bible that I never read, and I started reading it like from day one. Just open it up and like, in the beginning there's God, like Genesis 1, right? And then I started asking Stacy questions, and then when she didn't have an answer, she would ask her parents. And I started going to Bible studies, and I started just asking myself a question like, what if I just believe Jesus is my dad? Like, everybody says God's my father. Okay, so Jesus is the sacrificial lamb. Like, what if Jesus was maybe my dad? What could Jesus teach me? So I literally went through the Bible, and it was one of those red letter Bibles. And I actually chewed on every single word Jesus said, and it just changed my life. It literally did. Wow. And so that was the secret ingredient to my change. But, people always say, like, you have to have a why that makes you cry. And that's legit. That's good. But I always say you have to have a why that makes you fly over the obstacles, over the adversity. And that why was, I'm not going to infect my son with the fatherlessness that I had. Yeah. And so I was broken from the concept, like, I'm the baby of my dad's kids. So I'm number 10. And so, like, I just, like, to me, it was like, okay, I'm the one that broke him, so it's one of those weird things, right? So like, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't fathom the idea that, like, if we put him up for adoption, because we were 16 and 17, like, I don't want a kid roaming around with this anger
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was on probation for fighting because I had so much rage as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to do that to my kids. So that's the why. But the
Yeah.
change agent was the red letter of Jesus.
Mm. Wow. It's profound.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of diving into resilience, like that's like a perfect story that leads up to resilience. And I feel
Yeah.
I feel like having worked in the field,
Right.
I think sometimes resilience can be overused or
Yes.
like thrown around in a way that it can lose its meaning. So you might say
Yes.
resilience to someone, or you might say adversity to someone, and they might roll their eyes because it's just kind of thrown around. So I
Yeah.
was wondering, like, when you think about the word resilience, how do you define it? How do you view it, see it? What is it for you?
Yeah. So like, okay, so the definition would be the capacity to bounce back, or the capacity to like persevere through difficulties. And I like that idea, like the capacity to bounce back. Okay. And another word would be elasticity, the bounce. Okay. So this is a logo that we developed. I don't know if you can
Yep.
see that. Okay.
Yep.
So the blue is a ball,
Mm-hmm.
and underneath that ball is like a little handball, a really solid ball that has a lot of bounce to it. And
Yep.
then all those lines around it are rubber bands. So imagine like a handball, a bouncy ball, and then
Yep.
imagine like 100 rubber bands around it.
Yep.
So when a ball is hit like a tennis ball, it gets squished. And then the energy, if you figure out the energy, you can reboot that energy and bounce back with fervor,
Mm-hmm.
back with fire. And so the idea like to get squished sucks because nobody usually anticipates it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll normally bounce back, but we don't have directionality. Like I bounced back and fought kids, you know? And so the idea for us is the ability to bounce back from adversity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have this ball and you put a rubber band around it for every attempt I make at launching or escaping my normal or climbing out to the next level. And so we call that a climb. So where I stand currently on any goal in life, that's my baseline. And then my set a goal. The distance between where I stand and my goal, I call that a climb. I like to
Okay.
see it as an uphill battle because I need kids to know, like, if you stop, you're going to slide back to the baseline. You
Mm-hmm.
can't stop. You just can't quit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the ball represents life. Okay. And each rubber band is an attempt. So for me, the definition of resilience is that you bounce back with attempts, which
Mm-hmm.
makes you stronger each and every opportunity.
Mm.
So I did this with my family. I just took 100 rubber bands around a ball, and we play handball. And so we just took these little balls and let them bounce. One just a basic ball, and one with the 100 rubber bands. And the one with the 100 rubber bands bounced higher than the other one. And it's true. Like the more times you fail, the
Mm-hmm.
more times you're buffeted from adversity.
Right.
So much so that people start to love the failure.
Mm-hmm.
They actually love it. And just, you know, Jordan says he's failed 1,000 times, and that's the reason why he's successful. And so that's the idea of resilience is people get too hung up on the outcome. And I just want them to make an attempt. So
Sure.
like, hey, should I apply for this job? I don't think I'm qualified. Go get the interview because it's an attempt.
Sure.
You know, hey, I want to try for this dance team, but I don't think I'll make it because I'm like one of the last ones to go. Like, okay, try out because you'll learn a lot. It's a rubber band, collect rubber bands. And so if they're not afraid of the adversity, they'll actually grow through the resilience. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, very true. Very true. And also there's something, to be said by when you try, like there's the mind can play, as you know, tricks on you.
Yes.
And there's a sense of, if you don't try things, it can easily build into, I can't do it. Versus if you actually, like the dance team, like, you're probably not going to make the dance team, but you try out and you have the experience of trying out for the dance team. So you know what was expected of you, what the experience is like. So now you have that confidence behind you that you were able to actually do it, even if you didn't make the team. And maybe next time you'll try out and make it because now you've had this experience and you've learned something from it. So it will give you the confidence and the knowledge to do it the next time.
Yes. 100%.
Got it.
Yes.
So one of the things I was thinking about is I'm thinking about people, similar to your situation, or people who have experienced trauma, because there's hardship
Yes.
and there's trauma.
Correct.
And many of people that you and I have worked with, or you work with now, have experienced sort of more than hardship. There's been, traumatic events in their life that can be life altering.
Yes.
So I was sort of thinking, like, for those kind of people who are similar to your background, who have experienced abuse or trauma, or had significant losses in their lives, how do you see resilience working for them? Or what helps them to be, and I know everyone's different. Like,
Sure.
I'm not trying to generalize, but I'm just trying to get your sense in those situations.
Sure. So the first thing would be like, okay, so hardship would be adversity. So like I'm an athlete and I had to play through, a broken hand. So I missed several games.
Right.
And now I'm practicing with the cast on, and I might get into the game with the cast, and I might get a few carries as a running back. That's resilience working through adversity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Resilience working through a trauma. So there's a psychological trauma, which would be a very heightened stressful event that caused emotional, psychological pain. So like a dog chased me and almost bit me, and I jumped up on, a porch, and then it didn't get me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a level of trauma, but it's called the psychological trauma. It wasn't life threatening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that would be like an acute trauma, an acute stress. And normally it takes about 6 months to kind of work through that trauma. And then you introduce dogs again in a very safe environment, and then we're off and running again. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about is significant trauma that causes life altering circumstances. So this is the real or perceived death or threat of losing your life. So like somebody grabs a gun and points it to you, and you're at a bank and you lay on the ground and nothing physically happened to you, but the fact that a gun was pointed at your head, you knew you could die.
Right.
That's what we're talking about, life altering trauma. So that goes into chronic stress, which means it produces this heightened stress response in my body where I can't get over. And then there's the complex stress. So that complex stress would be like a person in the military. So there was a tank bomb, there was a grenade, there was a claymore, there was bullet shots. I lost a friend. So like multiple chronic traumas all put into one. So we have complex trauma. Okay. So for those two significant traumas, which would be chronic trauma and the complex trauma, those fall into PTSD categories. And for that person, here's what happens. Like if I just said, "Hey," and people jump, that's called the startle. Okay. That's your fight or flight. So if you've played sports, you get this, you're at a baseball game and somebody else heads up, some people duck and some people like reach up. Like this just happened. My nephew was in a state playoff game and we're all hanging out there and everybody yelled heads up. And I just happened to look up, it hit the foul pole. They went over the fence, hit like a light pole, and it came down right at this kid's head. And I just reached over and grabbed it. And everybody was like, their heads ducked. So because of my trauma, people say heads up and I'm on fight mode.
Yeah.
Okay. And because of people's trauma, people say heads up and they're in protect mode.
Sure.
Okay. So, and I can't tell you how or why, but it just did. So the trauma turned on a switch that anytime hypervigilance is necessary, so everybody yells, "Watch out."
Mm-hmm.
I quickly go into fight mode. So like cortisol dumps in the stomach and I have adrenaline and I'm like looking around to protect myself and others.
Yep.
Okay. And my sister, who went through the same stuff, her engine turned on where she is protecting. So she would probably duck.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't mean she's weak. That means like that's just the engine, the natural switch that got left on.
Sure.
So my tendency when poop hit the fan, like I would fight. Now my sister used to have that engine because she was in trouble for fighting as well.
Mm-hmm.
But now her engine has changed to where she more likely would protect.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why that complex and chronic trauma is so difficult is because normally when you make a decision, like let's just say you're making a decision, pizza or chicken at a restaurant. It's seven cognitive steps that your brain has to analyze. If people yelled and you had to like run, there's 3 steps. So this hypervigilance trauma, the fight or flight engine shortcuts.
Mhm.
So for people who have had this trauma, that shortcut's left on. So you hear a dog bark, or you hear something that sounds like a grenade, or you hear a voice that sounds like your stepdad. Instantaneously that switches on, and before you can even know what just happened, your body's already acting. So
Right.
your body acts for you before your brain. And that's why people do things that like people are afraid of, like pick up a chair and like look at the front door, and you're like, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
you're like, I'm sorry. I thought someone was breaking in.
Right.
Okay. Those complex traumas are very significant. And so a lot of times people will hear like, oh, well, somebody broke into their house. And before anybody can explain anything, you hear I hate to be like stereotypical, but typically a male, right?
Mhm.
Say, oh, shoot, like, pull yourself up. Like, what's wrong with you? You need to be resilient.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, resilient is for adversity.
Mhm.
Okay. It's a hardship. It's difficult to be resilient when you have trauma,
Mhm.
because there's so much junk to wade through, first of all.
Right.
Resilience starts, however, once you can renew your perspective. So like I teach is like, that's what happened to you. That's not who you are.
Mhm.
Okay. And the second you can split those 2 pieces, like, so my dad hit me a lot. He abused me. So like, I can separate that out. Like, that's what happened to me. That's not who I am.
Right.
So once I've freed up my identity, now I can start to move in resilience of, let me build me.
Right.
But if I'm trapped, like I was abused, and I'm just sitting here like this abused little kid, and nobody has helped me renew my perspective on how to see this, I'm stuck. There's no way I can be resilient because I'm still protecting myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it. And I think that I think it's a really important part of the process of sort of how do you get to a place where you can own your own identity, and the identity isn't sort of the person, like you said, that was harmed. You made it through that, and
Correct.
now you're standing here, and that happened to you, but it isn't you. and
Correct.
and you've made it through, and
Correct.
that's why I think often the word that's thrown around is survivor. And I think for some people that's an empowering word. I think different people have different views of that, but
Right.
I think when people see themselves as a survivor, it feels a lot different than when you think of yourself as a victim.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think words matter.
Yes.
And so that kind of brings me into the thought around like self-talk and how you think about things, because we all can get trapped in our heads, and our brains can tell us things that bring us down.
Yes.
I always tell people, don't believe everything you think, and I even say that to myself sometimes. So I was wondering how you would talk about the use of self-talk, and shifting the way you think, how that can help a person who's trying to work their way through to a more resilient sort of stance.
Yeah. So let's just talk just specifically self-talk, just self-talk. So I'm kind of a big dude. So I'm like 230 pounds, and I try to go on runs a lot, and my knees hurt from college football and squatting, 600 pounds or something. So I start to run and I get these pains all the time. And the number one way I can bust through the pain isn't to focus on my ankle. So
Right.
my self-talk, if I say, wow, that hurts, and I start to think, well, I don't want to get hurt because then I can't work. And then I have a medical bill, and I can go down a rabbit hole. And then next thing you know, I'm walking. So as tough or as resilient as I think I am, I can wreck myself with poor self-talk. So I'm running, I have ankle pain, and I will notice my ankles hurts, and I'll say, hey, ankle, hey, I need you, bro. Like, hey, we're one flesh, we're a body, we got this. And then my knee starts to hurt because it'll change, the pain will shift. And I say the same thing to my knee. Hey, knee, hey, you got this. I'll tap myself on the knee, and I was like, you go, buddy. We got this. Like, hey, I know you're slow to warm up. Like, you're kind of an old geezer. Like, let's go. It's going to take you a little bit of time. And I talk to myself. And then like, it just starts to hurt. So like, then you got this vague pain because like you're waking up all these cells in your body. And so then I look and I just say, okay, here's a yellow buggy. I'm going to run till I get that buggy. And then I just start keep changing my mindset. Then I'll
Mhm.
say, hey, Sanchez, I bet you can't run to the light pole. Okay, run the light pole. Hey, I bet you can't run to that fence. Hey, I bet you can't run to the pool. Like, okay, I bet you can't pay attention to your leg, by the time you get to, that next blue car. And before you know it, you're running and your beeper goes off and you just ran a mile.
Mhm.
And so if you can talk to yourself about your goal, all the pain stuff subsides, right? So like the haters have nothing to say if you're moving.
Mhm.
Okay. So
Mhm.
like one time I was, running a half marathon and there was a guy in front of me and it says, I might be slow, but I'm 10 times faster than you laying on your couch hating on me. I didn't have my phone with me or I would take a picture, but it was like,
Yeah.
it was so dope.
Yeah.
I looked at him, I ran by him. I just like pointed his shirt. I love your shirt. It's like,
Yeah.
cause he was
Yeah.
kind of going slow. Right. But
Right.
yeah, but that's the whole concept. Like you're moving. Okay. So self-talk is I got to focus on my goal and I talk to myself toward my goal and everything else dies. Here's where people go wrong. Okay. Now, if you focus on trauma, people will say like, I would like to run a marathon or I would like to join a group, but everything I do fails. And then that's where I start to open up, like, how many things have I failed? So now I answer the question, why did I fail? Well, my knee hurts. Okay. And so negative self-talk will wreck you because you can't escape your own talk. So let's say I was friends with you and like, let's just say your whole house, your whole backyard, everything runs on a fob. Okay. So if you gave me a fob, I'd walk into that place like I own it. Because as soon as I get close, everything opens. Do you
Mhm.
understand?
Yeah.
So when you try to tell me stuff, you have to go through like a gauntlet. So you'll say, hey, Sanchez, you shouldn't be running. And I'll say, shut up. You don't own me. But I say that in my head.
Right.
Okay. But if I say it to myself has a fob. So I walk right through. So I'm going to say, hey, you shouldn't probably run. Your knee sucks. Well, now I own that because it's my own self-talk. Right. So
Mhm.
our self-talk is absolutely an assignment for our future.
Mm.
And if I don't catch my self-talk, I'm assigning myself failure. I'm assigning myself pain. I'm assigning myself hardship. I'm assigning myself what happened last week when I tried earlier. Okay. And so the self-talk, if we say it out loud, it's an assignment for me to succeed. And remember, you have a fob. So whatever you say can and will be used against you. Because I don't have to hit a code. I don't
Right.
have to hit a punch code. I'm in.
Right.
You get it? And
Yeah.
that's what's so funny to me because I say this all the time, especially young guys, young men and women, like
Yeah.
college age people. I'll say, look, if somebody got on your blog and said, you suck, you shouldn't be writing, what would you say? Like, I don't even pay attention. I just swipe and delete them. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
then why do you do that to yourself?
Right.
And you should see their jaw. Like you fight haters more on social media than you fight your own self.
Yeah.
And they're just like, what? They're like, dude, that just wrecked me. So that is huge. Like self-talk, I promise you, like if there's one key, self-talk, it's huge. You can't underestimate it.
Mm.
I'm sorry, you can't overestimate it.
Yeah. No, I totally
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
One other thing, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here because I know we're kind of coming to an end, but I had the opportunity to see another interview that you had done, and you spoke about the concept of living legacy.
Yeah.
And that just touched me in a certain way. It's sort of like I knew it already, but the way you talk about it and the name just really struck me. So, I just wanted to kind of shift a little bit. And some of this ties into like how we live our lives and our resilience and how we move forward impacts how we are with the people we love, right? So
Yes.
there is a tie into this, but
Yes.
can you just share the concept of living legacy?
Absolutely. Like that's honestly been my baby. So I'm like a living legacy coach. And I coach CEOs and business owners, entrepreneurs, because they get lost with this, right? So, okay, so the concept of a legacy is people say, hey, you need to leave your legacy, leave a mark. So when you die, people will like name a high school wing after you or build a gym and put Sanchez Gym or something. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's legit work. Like I went to NDSU on scholarship because people left legacies to get single parent kids like me, single
Sure.
mom kids to get to go to college. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not speaking against it.
Yeah.
There's just another way as well. Like it's a different thing. And this is called the living legacy. And the living legacy is I don't want to leave money to my kid or leave money to a hospital wing. I want to download how I think, how I problem solve, how I do mastermind skills with me, what my mindset is. I want to download that to my kids ASAP when real time epiphanies hit me. So that living legacy sparked from a concept where I have a lot of men my age, actually middle-aged men, and they come in and cry. And there's one of two things that really hit them. Number one is they never knew their dad and they struggle with that still. Okay. And number two is they're a father, sometimes a grandfather, and they struggle to get their kids to come back with them. And I'll say, what's up with your kids? And it's like, well, just like grinding the candle at both ends, and then it comes around full circle and he'll say something like, well, he's a chip off the old block. Actually, he's building a nest egg to leave to his kids. A concept of generational wealth is taken off, right? Leave your legacy for your grandkids. That's taken off. And here's what I hear. Like a lot of people, especially college age people, say this, like, I don't care about his money. Like, my dad thinks I'm stupid. Like he's not here for me. He doesn't come to my stuff, but then, he'll just dump money into my account and say, I love you. Now, like, I get it. Like he's busy. I get it. He's working. I get it. He's grinding and stuff like that. And a dad doesn't know how to parent. And their number one excuse for parenting mistakes is, hey, I never had a dad. My dad was never around. So they're stuck in what we call default mode. Mm-hmm. Default mode is just like when you buy your phone, like it's set to, different presets, and then you get to code it how you want to. If I don't do any learning about parenting, I will parent exactly like my stepdad parented me, because it's not do as I say. How we actually learn is observational learning. Monkey see, monkey do. I saw you do it, therefore I programmed it. Right? You can talk about whatever you want, but nobody listens to talk. Everybody listens to behavior.
Right.
And so the living legacy piece is this. If, like right now I have a 23-year-old son, just graduated from Iowa State. If I look back at myself at 23 and him at 23, I want him to have my 40-year-old mindset while he's at 23. Okay. I don't want him to have my 23-year-old self, because that's not really leveling up. So people want to leave a legacy to your kids financially because they're going to be better off than you were. I get that.
Yeah.
But more importantly than the money is the concept of how my dad solved problems. So like we all talk about Kobe's legacy, right? It's the Mamba mentality. We want to know how he thought. We want to know how he broke down problems. We want to know, dude, what was inside his head? How did he do that? Okay. That I want my kids to figure that out for me. Here's a fear. I had a fear once, and it's just like God gives me visions. And I had this idea that like there was a guy going around trying to ask people like, hey, do me a favor. Can you have your dad call me? Because I want to take your dad out for coffee, because I want your dad to teach me about my dad. He wasn't around for me. You get that? And that kind of sucks it's really a big pain for me, because that touches my heart. Like I never knew my dad.
Right.
And so, so the living legacy is this. I want people to call my kids. Like when I'm off this earth, I'm in heaven. I want people to call my kids and be like, hey, Tyler, can I take you out for coffee? Like, yeah, sure. What's up? Dude, I just need to know like how your dad solved some problems. I have a few questions about his mindset. Like, and I'm not trying to brag, like I'm just an average dude, but like, I want my kids to feel confident about like how my dad solved problems. That's the living legacy. So that's how that works. I want to dump in real life epiphany, real life mindset nuggets now, so that my kids are way ahead of me, were at the same age I was.
Well, and it sounds like along with sharing life experience and thoughts and problem solving, that it's also just about being sort of present in their life.
Absolutely.
Taking the time out of your life to be with them and share what you want to share with them.
Yeah, correct. Like this morning after my devotional time, I didn't do this. I didn't do this for the podcast. Honestly, at that time, I forgot about it. It was on my schedule when I got to the office, but I probably sent like, I don't know, like 2 scrolls worth of like a message that I felt like God gave me. So I sent it to the kids this morning about, just like a devotional lesson that I read from a book from Reinhard Bonnke. This is a concept he taught, so I'm like, dude, this is pretty dope. Like, look at this. And then I send it to my kids. So some of it's mine, some of it's stuff I know, and some of it's just stuff that hits me. Like as you said, you heard a podcast and then you're like, dude, I want this living legacy thing. So you'll probably tell people about it because it hits you, right?
Right.
Now, this is crazy, but think about this. You do this with your best friends. You do this with your colleagues. Why don't we do it with our kids?
Yeah.
Right. Because then we can level them up right now, ASAP. Right. So I want my kids to be way sharper and way more wise than I am.
Yeah. And I have the opportunity, both my parents, I've had them my entire life and they're now in their 70s. but I have the opportunity for them to share with me now, which I know is a blessing that I
Yes.
have this opportunity for them to
Absolutely.
share things with me. And I understand that not everybody has that.
Yes.
And so I listen.
Yeah.
I don't always agree with everything, but I listen and I take
Yeah.
it in, and I know them. Like I know
Yes.
my parents, and so when their time comes, they won't leave with me feeling like I missed something along the
Yeah.
way.
Right. I never knew them. So, and this is a great point too, because like, okay, your parents are telling you stories, but they're not using iPhones, right? Like, so you have to you have to laugh a lot, some of the stuff they say, and then you have to grab it and like, okay, where's the nugget that I can apply? And
Right.
that's how you work it, you know? So sometimes my kids are like, Dad, you're still a boomer. So I'm like, well, I just apply it then, you know,
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
that's good too. So congrats. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I'm very blessed. Well, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your insights and your knowledge. I appreciate the way you explain things. I think it's super helpful to have examples and to explain it in a way that everybody can understand.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate your style, and I'm sure you're amazing at what you do with the people you work with.
Thank
So,
you.
and I didn't get paid to say that or anything. Like
I
I've
ain't got
worked with a
money
lot
for
of
you.
people in the field, and I know a star when I meet one. So it's nice to know there's people out there like you that are, providing this insight and wisdom
Sure.
and support for people who need it. So,
Thank you.
well, thank you very much for your time. And thank you all for listening to Monday Mornings with Margie. And I will see you next week.
Thank you. Peace.